Kang Do-hyun was tired. He had been working on broken ship engines for 12 hours straight. His hands were covered in oil and his back hurt from bending over machinery all day. All he wanted was to return to his small cabin, eat something warm, and sleep for a very long time. He lived alone on Station 17, a forgotten place at the edge of known space. The station was old and falling apart, but it was home. Do-hyun was the only mechanic here, which meant he fixed everything from water pipes to starship engines. The pay was not great, but the work was honest, and nobody bothered him. As he walked through the empty corridor toward his cabin, he noticed something strange. There was smoke coming from under his door, not the kind of smoke from fire, but the cold kind that came from damaged cooling systems. He ran to his door and pressed his hand against the scanner. The door slid open with a broken sound, and what he saw made him freeze completely. There was a hole in his ceiling. A large hole. Through it, he could see the bent metal of what looked like an escape pod. The pod had crashed directly through the station hull and into his living space. Emergency foam had already sealed the breach, which was the only reason he was still breathing. But that was not the most shocking thing. On his floor, lying among the broken pieces of his furniture, were two women. They were pale, impossibly pale, with silver hair that spread around them like water. They wore nothing at all. Their clothes had apparently burned away during their crash through the atmosphere shields. Do-hyun stood there for a long moment, his brain trying to understand what his eyes were seeing. Then his training took over. He was a mechanic, yes, but every frontier worker learned basic medical care. These women were hurt. He grabbed the emergency blanket from his wall kit and rushed to them. The first woman had a deep cut on her forehead. The second one had burns on her arms. Both were breathing, but barely. As he wrapped the blanket around the first woman, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. She had fangs. Long, sharp fangs that poked out from her upper lip. He looked at the second woman. She had them too. Vampires. These were vampires. Do-hyun had heard stories about them. Everyone in the galaxy had. The Vampire Dominion was one of the oldest and most powerful empires in existence. They ruled over 100 star systems. They drank blood to survive, and they considered humans to be little more than food. For a moment, he thought about calling station security. Then he remembered that station security was just Old Man Park, who was probably drunk and asleep right now. He thought about leaving them here to die, but he could not do that. No matter what they were hurt. And he was not the kind of person who let anyone die, if he could help it. He carried the first woman to his bed. She was lighter than he expected, almost like she weighed nothing at all. He placed her gently on the mattress and covered her with his warmest blanket. Then he went back for the second one and placed her beside her companion. For the next 3 hours, Do-hyun worked. He cleaned their wounds with medical gel. He bandaged the cut on the first woman's head. He treated the burns on the second woman's arms with cooling spray. He checked their vital signs with his old medical scanner, which told him things he did not understand about their alien biology. When he was done, he sat down on the floor beside his bed and let out a long breath. His cabin was destroyed. There was a crashed escape pod in his ceiling, and there were 2 unconscious vampire women in his bed. This was not how he had expected his day to end. He looked through the wreckage of the escape pod and found a small data chip. When he plugged it into his terminal, a recorded message began to play. It showed a beautiful vampire woman with silver hair and red eyes, speaking in a language he did not understand. But the translation program on his terminal converted it to common speech. "This is Princess Valora of the Vampire Dominion. Our transport has been attacked by pirates. My sister Lasara and I are launching in Escape Pod 7. If anyone finds this message, please help us. Our mother, Queen Morvena, will reward you greatly." Do-hyun stared at the screen. Princesses. They were princesses. He had 2 vampire princesses in his bed. He looked at the sleeping women. Then back at the screen. Then at the women again. A strange laugh escaped his throat. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who knew his life had just become very complicated. He found some of his old clothes in a storage box that had survived the crash. A simple shirt and pants that would be too big for them, but at least they would have something to wear when they woke up. He left the clothes at the foot of the bed, along with a bottle of water and some food bars. Then he made himself a small bed on the floor, using cushions from his broken couch. He was too tired to think anymore. Whatever problems tomorrow would bring, he would deal with them then. He fell asleep quickly, which surprised him. He had expected to lie awake, worrying about the vampire princesses in his bed. But his body was too exhausted to care about such things. He woke up to the feeling of being watched. Do-hyun opened his eyes slowly. The two vampire women were sitting up in his bed, staring at him. They had put on the clothes he had left for them. The shirts hung loose on their slender frames, and the pants were rolled up at the ankles. They looked strange and small in his human clothing. "You saved us," the one with the forehead bandage said. Her voice was soft and musical, like bells ringing in the distance. "You are human," the other one added. She sounded surprised, as if she had not expected a human to help them. "Yes," Do-hyun said, sitting up slowly. "My name is Kang Do-hyun. You crashed into my cabin." The two women looked at each other, then back at him. "I am Valora," the first one said. "This is my sister Lasara. We are princesses of the Vampire Dominion," Do-hyun finished. "I saw the message on your escape pod." Valora's red eyes widened slightly. "You know who we are? And yet you still helped us?" Do-hyun shrugged. "You were hurt. I could not just let you die." The two sisters exchanged another look. This time, there was something strange in their eyes. Something that made Do-hyun uncomfortable, though he did not understand why. "Human," Lasara said slowly. "Do you know what you have done?" Do-hyun frowned. "I bandaged your wounds and gave you my bed." "What about it?" Before either princess could answer, a sound filled the station. It was the sound of alarms. The sound of multiple ships entering the station's sensor range. The sound of an approaching fleet. Valora closed her eyes. "Our mother is here." Do-hyun felt his stomach drop. The queen of the Vampire Dominion was coming, and her daughters were sitting in his cabin, wearing his clothes, covered in his scent. He had a very bad feeling about this. The station shook as the vampire fleet surrounded it. Through the broken hole in his ceiling, Do-hyun could see the massive warships blocking out the stars. Each ship was black as night, and shaped like a curved fang. There were at least 20 of them, all pointed at the tiny station like weapons ready to fire. "We need to explain," Valora said, standing up quickly. Her legs were still weak from the crash, and she stumbled. Do-hyun caught her arm before she could fall. "Explain what?" he asked. Lasara stood up too, moving to her sister's side. "Our people have very old traditions. Very strict laws about certain things." Do-hyun did not like the way she said that. "What kind of things?" Before she could answer, his door exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. Metal pieces flew across the room as a dozen vampire soldiers poured inside. They wore black armor and carried weapons that glowed with red energy. Their eyes were all the same shade of crimson, and their fangs were bared in anger. Behind them came a woman who needed no introduction. Queen Morvena was tall. Taller than any woman Do-hyun had ever seen. She had the same silver hair as her daughters, but hers was longer, reaching down to her waist like a river of moonlight. Her skin was pale as snow, and her eyes burned with a fire that seemed to look right through him. She wore a dress made of what looked like liquid darkness, flowing around her body like living shadow. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She was clearly very, very angry. "My daughters," the queen said, her voice cold as the void between stars. She looked at Valora and Lasara, then at the clothes they were wearing, then at Do-hyun, who was still holding Valora's arm. "Mother, please listen," Valora started. Silence. The queen's voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the room freeze. Even the soldiers seemed to hold their breath. Queen Morvena walked forward slowly. Each step she took made the floor creak under some invisible pressure. She stopped in front of Do-hyun and looked down at him. He was not a short man, but she was still taller by a full head. "Human," she said, speaking the word like it was something dirty. "Why are my vampire daughters naked in your cabin?" Do-hyun's brain stopped working for a moment. They were not, they were, but their clothes burned in the crash. "I gave them my clothes." "Your clothes," the queen repeated. She leaned closer, and Do-hyun could smell something strange on her breath, something sweet and dangerous. "They wear your clothes. They sleep in your bed. They are covered in your scent." "I was just helping them," Do-hyun said, his voice coming out higher than he wanted. "They were hurt. What was I supposed to do? Let them die?" The queen straightened up. Something flickered in her red eyes. "You touched my daughters. You wrapped them in your fabric. You let them rest in your sleeping place." She turned to look at her daughters. "And you allowed this?" "Mother, he saved our lives," Lasara said. "That does not change what has happened," the queen said. "The law is clear. A male who sees unmarried princesses without clothing, who touches their bodies, who gives them his coverings and his resting place, he has made a mating claim." Do-hyun felt like someone had hit him in the head. "A what?" "You have claimed my daughters as your mates, human." The queen's voice was ice. "By the ancient laws of our people, you have declared your intention to bond with them." "I did not declare anything," Do-hyun shouted. "I was being a decent person. In human culture, we help injured people. We do not let them lie naked and bleeding on the floor." "Your culture does not matter here," the queen said. "You are dealing with the vampire dominion now. Our laws apply." Valora stepped forward. "Mother, this is not fair. He did not know our customs. He was only trying to help." "Fair?" The queen laughed, and the sound was sharp like breaking glass. "You speak of fairness while wearing a strange male's clothing? While his scent covers you like a second skin?" She shook her head. "The Dominion has already received word of your rescue. Everyone knows that the princesses were found naked in a human's quarters. If I simply ignore this, we will be seen as weak. Our enemies will use this against us." Lasara moved to stand beside her sister. "Then what will you do? Kill him? He saved your daughters' lives." The queen was quiet for a long moment. Her red eyes studied Do-hyun like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. He stood still under her gaze, trying not to show how scared he was. "No," she finally said. "I will not kill him. That would be a poor reward for saving my children. Whatever the circumstances." She paused. "But he has made a claim, whether he intended to or not. The only way to resolve this is the old way." "Mother, no," Valora said, fear entering her voice for the first time. "The right of fangs," the queen announced, ignoring her daughter's protest. "The human will face 3 champions in combat. If he survives, his claim will be considered valid. If he dies," she shrugged, "then the problem solves itself." Do-hyun's heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. "You want me to fight 3 vampire champions? That is insane. I am a mechanic. I fix engines. I have never fought anyone in my life." "Then you will die quickly," the queen said simply. "But at least you will die with honor, which is more than most humans can say." She turned to her soldiers. "Take him to the holding cells on my ship. The rite will begin at the next cycle." She looked at her daughters. "You two will come with me. We have much to discuss." "Mother, please," Lasara tried again. "There must be another way." "There is," the queen said. "He could refuse the challenge and admit that he has no true claim. In that case, he would be executed for the insult of touching royal blood without permission." She smiled, showing her fangs. "I am giving him a chance to live. He should be grateful." The soldiers grabbed Do-hyun's arms and began dragging him toward the door. He struggled, but their grip was like iron. Vampire strength was no legend. As they pulled him past the princesses, Valora grabbed his hand for just a moment. Do not give up, she whispered quickly. We will find a way to help you. Then he was out the door and being marched through the station corridor toward the vampire ships. Behind him, he could hear the Queen's cold voice speaking to her daughters. But he could not make out the words. He was going to die. He was sure of it. There was no way a simple human mechanic could defeat even one vampire warrior, let alone 3. The Queen knew this. Everyone knew this. The Rite of Fangs was not a fair trial. It was an execution, with extra steps, but as the soldiers loaded him into a small transport ship, Do-hyun felt something strange building in his chest. It was not quite hope. It was not quite courage. It was something more stubborn than both. He was human. His ancestors had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the death of their home planet. They had spread across the galaxy not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they simply refused to stop trying. If the vampires wanted to kill him, they would have to work for it. He did not know how he was going to survive the Rite of Fangs. But he was going to find a way. Or die trying. Probably die trying, he admitted to himself. But still, trying. The holding cell on the vampire warship was cold and dark. Do-hyun sat on the metal floor with his back against the wall, trying to think of a way out of his situation. So far, he had thought of nothing useful. He had been here for several hours. At least, he thought it had been several hours. There were no windows and no clock. Just black walls, a locked door, and silence. The door opened suddenly, flooding the cell with red light. Do-hyun squinted against the brightness and saw 2 familiar figures stepping inside. We do not have much time, Valora said, closing the door behind her. She and Lysara were now wearing proper royal clothing, long dark dresses with silver patterns that seemed to move on their own. But their faces were worried. How did you get in here? Do-hyun asked, standing up quickly. We told the guards we wanted to look at the man who insulted our honor, Lysara said with a small smile. They were happy to let us in. They think we want to hurt you, do you? If we wanted you hurt, we would not have told you to keep hope, Valora said. She pulled something from under her dress, a small data pad. We came to help you prepare. Do-hyun took the pad and looked at the screen. It showed images and information about 3 vampire warriors. Their names were Krath, the Merciless, Baron Selvik, and Commander Thorn. Each one looked more dangerous than the last. These are your opponents, Lysara explained. Krath is the largest and strongest of the 3. He relies on pure power. He will try to crush you quickly. Baron Selvik is a noble who has won many duels, Valora added. He is fast and skilled with a blade. He will try to cut you apart, piece by piece. And Commander Thorn is a military veteran, Lysara continued. He has fought in real wars. He will not underestimate you like the others might. Do-hyun looked at the images. All 3 vampires were tall and muscular. All 3 had that dangerous red glow in their eyes. All 3 had killed many enemies before. This is supposed to make me feel better? He asked. This is supposed to help you understand your enemies, Valora said. You cannot beat them in strength or speed. You are human. But humans have other advantages. Do-hyun laughed bitterly. Like what? Our charming personalities? Like your endurance, Lysara said seriously. Vampires are powerful, but we tire faster than humans. If you can survive long enough, their strength will fade, while yours remains. And like your creativity, Valora added. Vampire warriors train in traditional combat styles. They follow rules and patterns. Humans do not fight that way. You use whatever works, whatever is nearby, whatever your enemy does not expect. Do-hyun thought about this. It was true that humans had a reputation in the galaxy for being unpredictable. Other species called them crazy, reckless, or stupid. But sometimes those things kept people alive. What are the rules of the right? He asked. Each fight is separate, Valora explained. You will face one champion at a time. The fight continues until one fighter cannot continue. Death is allowed but not required. If you defeat all 3 champions, you win the right. What weapons do I get? Any weapon you choose, Lysara said. Our warriors will use traditional vampire blades. You can use anything you want. Do-hyun's mind started working. He was a mechanic. He had spent his whole life taking things apart and putting them back together. He knew how machines worked. He knew how to use tools in ways they were not designed for. I need some things, he said slowly. Tools from my workshop on the station. Can you get them? The sisters looked at each other. What kind of tools? Valora asked. Do-hyun told them. Their eyes widened as he explained his plan. That is insane, Lysara said when he finished. That is exactly what I need it to be, Do-hyun replied. Valora was quiet for a moment. Then, a small smile appeared on her pale face. I think I understand now why humans have survived so long in this galaxy. Because we are too stubborn to die the way we are supposed to, Do-hyun said. Yes, she agreed. Exactly that. The sisters left to gather what he needed. Do-hyun sat back down on the cold floor. But this time, his mind was not empty. It was full of plans, calculations, and possibilities. He was still probably going to die. But now he had a chance. A small, crazy, human-sized chance. Hours later, the guards came for him. They led him through the dark corridors of the warship until they reached a large, circular room. It was an arena. The walls were lined with seats, and those seats were filled with vampires. Hundreds of them, all staring down at the fighting floor with hungry red eyes. At the top of the arena, sitting on a throne made of black metal, was Queen Morvena. She looked down at Do-hyun with an expression that was hard to read. Beside her sat Valora and Lysara. Still in their royal dresses, Lysara gave him the smallest nod. Human. The queen's voice echoed through the arena. You have been accused of making a mating claim upon the princesses of the vampire dominion. You have chosen to defend this claim through the right of fangs. Do you understand what this means? Do-hyun looked up at her. His heart was pounding, but he kept his voice steady. It means I fight 3 of your best warriors. If I win, the claim stands. If I lose, I die. Correct. The queen seemed almost impressed that he had not begged for mercy. And you still wish to proceed? I do. A murmur went through the crowd. They had expected him to be scared. They had expected him to cry or plead. Instead, he stood in the center of their arena, looking like he actually thought he could win. Very well, the queen said. Bring in the first champion. A door on the opposite side of the arena opened, and Krath the Merciless stepped out. He was huge, at least 2 meters tall, and twice as wide as Do-hyun. His muscles bulged under his armor, and his eyes burned with excitement. He carried a massive sword that looked like it weighed more than Do-hyun's entire body. Little human, Krath rumbled, his voice deep as thunder. I will try to make your death quick. Consider it a mercy. Do-hyun did not answer. Instead, he reached into the bag that the guards had let him bring, the bag that Valora and Lysara had filled with his requested items. He pulled out his tools. Krath laughed. You bring mechanic tools to a fight? What will you do? Fix my armor while I kill you. Something like that, Do-hyun said. The horn sounded, signaling the start of the fight. Krath charged forward like a mountain moving at terrible speed. His sword swung down in an arc that would have cut Do-hyun in half, but Do-hyun was not there anymore. He had already moved. Not fast, humans could not move as fast as vampires. But early. He had watched Krath's muscles, seen the moment before the attack, and started moving before the sword began its swing. The blade hit empty floor, cracking the stone. Krath roared in frustration and spun around. Do-hyun was behind him now, close to his back. In his hands was a welding torch. He turned it on. The blue flame shot out and hit the back of Krath's knee, finding the gap in his armor. The vampire screamed, a sound Do-hyun had never heard before. The smell of burning flesh filled the arena. Krath fell to one knee, his leg damaged. He swung his sword blindly behind him. But Do-hyun had already moved again. The crowd was silent. No one had expected this. The human was not trying to fight like a warrior. He was fighting like a mechanic, finding the weak points, applying pressure where it would do the most damage. And the fight had only just begun. Krath, the merciless, was on one knee, his legs smoking from the welding torch burn, but he was not finished. With a roar of rage, he pushed himself back to his feet and turned to face Do-hyun. "You burned me," he growled, disbelief clear in his voice. "You actually burned me." "First time for everything," Do-hyun replied, keeping the welding torch ready. Krath charged again, but this time he was slower. The injury to his leg affected his movement. Do-hyun used this advantage. He stayed close to the wounded side, forcing Krath to pivot on his damaged knee. Every turn made the vampire wince. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They had come to see a quick execution. Instead, they were watching a human mechanic dance around one of their strongest warriors. Krath swung his massive sword again and again. Each swing got slower as his strength began to fade. Lysara had been right. Vampires were powerful, but they could not maintain that power for long. Humans, on the other hand, were built for endurance. Do-hyun's ancestors had hunted animals by chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion. After 10 minutes of dodging and moving, Krath was breathing hard. Sweat ran down his face. His sword arm was shaking. Do-hyun saw his chance. He pulled another tool from his bag, a heavy wrench used for tightening large bolts on ship engines. As Krath raised his sword for another swing, Do-hyun threw the wrench directly at his face. The throw was not elegant. It was not skilled. But it was unexpected. The wrench hit Krath right between the eyes. The vampire stumbled backward, his sword dropping from his hands. Before he could recover, Do-hyun rushed forward and grabbed a handful of powder from a pouch at his belt, ground silver dust mixed with garlic powder. He threw it into Krath's eyes. The vampire screamed and fell to his knees, clawing at his face. Silver and garlic were not deadly to vampires, but they caused terrible pain. Krath rolled on the ground, unable to see, unable to think clearly. Do-hyun picked up the heavy wrench and stood over his fallen opponent. He raised it above his head, ready to strike. Then he stopped. "Yield," he said simply. Krath could not see him, but he heard the word. For a long moment, the arena was completely silent. Then, slowly, the massive vampire lowered his head. "I yield," Krath whispered. The crowd exploded into noise. Some were shouting in anger. Some were shouting in surprise. A few were actually cheering. No one had expected this outcome. No one had expected the human to show mercy. Queen Morvena stood from her throne. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes were calculating. "The human wins the first fight," she announced. "Prepare the second champion." Do-hyun backed away as medical vampires rushed to help Krath. His heart was racing, and his muscles ached from constant movement. But he had won. He had actually won. Baron Selvik entered the arena while Do-hyun was still catching his breath. Where Krath had been large and powerful, Selvik was thin and elegant. He moved like water flowing over rocks, smooth and dangerous. His blade was thin as a needle, and twice as long as Do-hyun's arm. "Impressive," Selvik said, his voice soft and cultured. "You defeated Krath with tricks and tools. Very clever. But tricks will not work on me. I have fought in 1,000 duels. I have seen every technique, every strategy, every desperate gamble." He smiled, showing his fangs. "You have nothing that can surprise me." Do-hyun looked at the vampire noble. He had used his best tricks against Krath. The welding torch was nearly empty now. He had only a small amount of the silver garlic powder left. And Selvik was faster than Krath. Much faster. But humans did not give up just because the odds were bad. "We will see," Do-hyun said. The horn sounded. Selvik moved like lightning. One moment he was across the arena. The next, his blade was inches from Do-hyun's throat. Only pure instinct saved him. He threw himself backward, feeling the blade cut through the air where his neck had been. He hit the ground hard and rolled. Selvik was already there, his blade stabbing down. Do-hyun barely managed to block with his wrench, sparks flying as metal met metal. "Good reflexes," Selvik said, sounding pleased. "Most opponents die before they know the fight has started." Troning, Do-hyun scrambled to his feet. His shoulder hurt where he had hit the ground. His arms were shaking from blocking the vampire's powerful strike. He was outmatched. He knew it. But he was not finished thinking. He started running not toward Selvik, but away from him. He ran toward the edge of the arena, where the stone walls rose up toward the watching crowd. Selvik laughed and chased him. Running away? How disappointing. Do-hyun reached the wall and turned around. Selvik was right behind him, his blade raised for a killing strike. That was exactly what Do-hyun wanted. He grabbed another tool from his bag, a can of industrial lubricant, the kind used to keep ship parts moving smoothly. As Selvik closed the distance, Do-hyun sprayed the lubricant all over the floor between them. Selvik's feet hit the slick surface mid-stride. His perfect balance failed him. His legs went out from under him, and he fell forward, his blade going wide. Do-hyun stepped aside and brought his wrench down on Selvik's sword hand. The vampire screamed as bones broke under the impact. His beautiful blade clattered away across the arena floor. But Selvik was not defeated yet. Even with a broken hand, he lashed out with his other arm, catching Do-hyun across the chest. The blow sent him flying backward. He crashed into the wall and felt something crack in his ribs. Pain exploded through his body. He could not breathe. He could barely see. Selvik stood up, his broken hand hanging uselessly at his side. His face was no longer elegant and calm. It was twisted with rage. "You dare?" he hissed. "You dare humiliate me?" He picked up his sword with his good hand and stalked toward Do-hyun. His movements were still fast, still dangerous. One vampire arm was enough to kill a human. Do-hyun tried to stand. His ribs screamed in protest. He could taste blood in his mouth. This was it. This was the end. No. He forced himself to his feet. His vision was blurry with pain. His legs barely held him. But he stood. Selvik paused, confusion flickering across his face. "Why do you not stay down? You are beaten. You are broken. Why do you keep standing?" "Because that is what humans do," Do-hyun said through gritted teeth. "We stand up. No matter how many times we fall, we stand up." He reached into his bag one more time. His fingers found the last tool he had brought, a simple screwdriver. Small, sharp, made for delicate work on tiny components. Selvik laughed. "A screwdriver? That is your final weapon?" "No," Do-hyun said. "This is..." He threw the screwdriver, but not at Selvik. He threw it upward, toward the lights that hung above the arena. The small tool flew straight and true, hitting the control panel that operated the lighting system. The arena went dark. For a moment, there was only blackness. Then, Do-hyun moved. He had been a mechanic on frontier stations for 15 years. He had worked in dark engine rooms, in tight spaces with no light, in places where his hands had to do the seeing. He knew how to move in darkness. Selvik did not. The vampire spun around, trying to find his target. But in the darkness, his speed and skill meant nothing. He could not hit what he could not find. Do-hyun came up behind him and wrapped his arms around the vampire's neck. He squeezed with everything he had left, cutting off the blood flow to Selvik's brain. Selvik struggled. He thrashed. He tried to reach behind him with his good hand, but Do-hyun held on like his life depended on it. Because it did. Seconds passed. Then Selvik's struggles grew weaker, and weaker, and finally stopped. The lights came back on. The arena gasped as they saw Do-hyun standing over the unconscious body of Baron Selvik. He had won again. Barely, painfully, but he had won. Queen Morvena's voice cut through the noise. 2 victories. Bring in the final champion. Let us see if this human can complete the impossible. Do-hyun stood in the center of the arena, blood dripping from his mouth, holding his broken ribs. Across from him, Commander Thorn entered with cold determination in his ancient eyes. One more fight. One more chance to live or die. Do-hyun smiled through the pain. He was still standing, and that meant he still had a chance. Commander Thorn was different from the other two champions. He did not boast. He did not threaten. He simply walked to the center of the arena and looked at Do-hyun with eyes that had seen centuries of battle. "You are brave," Thorn said quietly. "Foolish, but brave. I have fought many enemies in my long life. Humans are rare among them. Most die too quickly to study." Do-hyun tried to stand straight, but his broken ribs made every breath feel like fire. His tools were gone. His tricks were used up. All he had left was the heavy wrench in his hand, and the stubborn refusal to fall. "I am not most humans," Do-hyun said. Thorn nodded slowly. "No, you are not." He drew his sword, a plain military blade. Nothing fancy. Nothing decorated. It was a weapon made for killing, not showing off. "I will not underestimate you. I will not play with you. I will end this quickly." The horn sounded. Thorn moved forward, but not with the wild charge of Krath or the lightning speed of Selvik. He moved with the careful precision of a soldier who had learned that patience won more battles than passion. Do-hyun tried to back away, but his body would not cooperate. His legs were too tired. His ribs hurt too much. He could only watch as Thorn approached. The commander's blade came at him in a simple, efficient thrust. Do-hyun managed to deflect it with his wrench, but the impact sent pain shooting through his arms. Thorn followed with another strike, then another. Each one was controlled, measured, designed to wear Do-hyun down. There were no openings to exploit, no mistakes to take advantage of. Thorn was everything the other two were not: disciplined, experienced, and deadly serious. Do-hyun felt his strength failing. His blocks were getting slower. His movements were getting weaker. Soon, very soon, he would not be able to defend himself anymore. In the royal seats, Valora gripped her sister's hand. "He cannot win," she whispered. "Thorn is too strong. He has to win," Lysara replied, but her voice shook with fear. Queen Morvena watched with an expression that had slowly changed throughout the fights. When Do-hyun had first entered the arena, she had looked at him with contempt. Now, there was something else in her eyes. Something like respect. Down in the arena, Do-hyun fell to one knee. Thorn's blade had cut his arm, and blood was running down to his hand, making the wrench slippery. The vampire commander stood over him, blade raised for the final strike. "You fought well, human," Thorn said. "Better than any I have faced. It has been an honor." The blade came down. Do-hyun did not try to block it. He did not try to dodge it. Instead, he did something no vampire expected. He let it hit him. The blade sank into his shoulder, deep and painful. Do-hyun screamed. Blood poured from the wound. But his free hands shot forward and grabbed Thorn's arms, pulling the vampire close. "Humans are good at one more thing," Do-hyun gasped, his face inches from Thorn's shocked expression. "We are good at not caring about pain." He headbutted Thorn as hard as he could. Their skulls cracked together with a sound like thunder. Thorn stumbled backward, his grip on his sword loosening. Do-hyun, with a blade still stuck in his shoulder, threw himself at the vampire. They crashed to the ground together, rolling across the arena floor. Do-hyun punched, elbowed, kneed, anything he could do to keep Thorn off balance. The vampire was stronger, but he was stunned from the headbutt, and Do-hyun was fighting like a wild animal now. He was not thinking about winning anymore. He was not thinking about anything. He was pure survival instinct, wrapped in human skin. Thorn finally managed to throw Do-hyun off. The human landed hard on his back, gasping for air. The vampire stood up, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "Enough," Thorn said, raising his fist for a killing blow. "Time to end this." "Wait." The voice was Queen Morvena's. It echoed through the arena like a command from the heavens. Thorn froze, his fists suspended in the air. The queen stood from her throne and walked down from the royal seats. Every vampire in the arena watched in stunned silence as she descended to the fighting floor. She walked past Thorn without looking at him and stopped in front of Do-hyun. He lay on his back, bleeding from multiple wounds, barely conscious. But his eyes were still open. He was still looking at her. "Human," the queen said, her voice strange and soft. "Kang Do-hyun, do you know what you have done today?" Do-hyun coughed, blood specking his lips. "Probably made things worse for myself," he managed to say. The queen laughed. It was not the cold, sharp laugh from before. It was something genuine, something surprised. "You have done something no one has done in 1,000 years. You have survived the Rite of Fangs. I have not won yet," Do-hyun pointed out. "The third fight is not over." "Yes, it is," the queen said. She turned to Thorn. "Commander, do you believe you have seen this human's true measure?" Thorn looked at Do-hyun with those ancient, knowing eyes. "I have, my queen. And I yield." A roar went through the crowd. Vampires were shouting, arguing, some cheering. The commander of the royal guard had yielded to a human. It was unprecedented. "You yield?" Do-hyun asked, confused. "But you were winning." "I was winning the fight," Thorn agreed. "But you were winning something greater. You showed me your heart, human. You showed all of us. Even with death certain. You did not stop. You did not beg. You simply kept going." He bowed his head. "I have seen that spirit in very few warriors. It would be a crime to destroy it." Queen Morvena turned back to Do-hyun. "The Rite of Fangs is complete. You have defeated 3 champions. Your claim upon my daughters is valid." She extended her hand to help him up. Do-hyun stared at it for a moment, then took it. The queen pulled him to his feet with surprising gentleness. "Now," she said, "we must discuss the terms of this claim. My daughters are princesses of the Dominion. They cannot marry just anyone. Their husband must have status, power, position." Do-hyun's head was spinning. "I am just a mechanic," he said. "I do not have any of those things." "You did not," the queen corrected. "But after today, every vampire in the galaxy knows your name. They know what you did in this arena. You have more status now than most nobles in my court." Valora and Lysara rushed down from the royal seats. They threw their arms around Do-hyun, holding him carefully to avoid his wounds. "You did it," Valora said, tears running down her pale cheeks. "You actually did it." "We knew you would," Lysara added, though her voice suggested she had not been entirely sure. Queen Morvena watched her daughters embrace the wounded human. Something flickered in her red eyes, something that might have been approval. "There is still the matter of the wedding," she said. "Vampire royal weddings are complex affairs. They take months to plan. Many rituals must be observed." Do-hyun looked at Valora and Lysara, then at the queen. "With respect, Your Majesty, can we discuss this after someone fixes the hole in my shoulder?" The queen actually smiled. "Yes, I suppose we can." She waved her hand, and medical vampires rushed forward to attend to Do-hyun's wounds. "Take him to the Royal Medical Bay. Give him the best care available." As they carried him away, Do-hyun looked back at the arena. The crowd was still buzzing with noise. Many were looking at him with new eyes, not as prey, not as a lower creature, but as something unexpected, something dangerous, something worth respecting. He caught Valora's eye. She smiled at him, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he felt like everything might actually be okay. He had come to this station to be alone, to fix engines, to live a quiet life. Instead, he had crashed through the ceiling of vampire society, earned the respect of their queen, and apparently gotten engaged to 2 princesses. Life was strange sometimes, but as he felt Valora's hand slip into his while they carried him to the medical bay, he decided that maybe strange was not so bad after all.